Public Protection Scrutiny Subcommittee on this lovely Friday morning, the 9th July 2021. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not speak or participate. Please do not make any comments in the chat function also. I would also like to welcome the councillors who are not members of this committee but have asked to attend this morning, and Inspector Matthew Otterson and Chief Inspector Gareth Prosser from South Wales Police to the meeting. Can I please remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? And can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork for us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function, or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate what page number you are referring to? And I will now go to the first item on the agenda to do a roll call. I am Councillor Steve Hunt. I am the chair and I am present. I will now ask Chloe, the Democratic Service Officer, to take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've marked you as present. Councillor Rachel Taylor.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Dean Causey.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Chris Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Sheila Penry.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Sean Percy.
Present.
Councillor Saifra Harman.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Scott Bamsey.
Present, Chloe.
Then the invited members, Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Mark Prothero.
Present, thanks, Chloe.
And Cabinet members, Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present, Chloe.
And officers, Chris Millis.
Present, Chloe, thanks.
Eleanor Wellington.
Present, Chloe, thanks.
Claire Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Matthew Otterson from South Wales Police.
Present.
And I don't believe Gareth Prosser is in the meeting. I'm not sure if he's planning on attending or not, but we have resent him the invite. Have I missed anyone who's participating in today's meeting? Nope, I think that's everyone, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. He can attend as and when. If he shows, can you indicate that he's here for me, please?
Yes, of course, Chair.
Thank you, Chloe. Item 2 is a chair's announcement. We have one item on the scrutiny agenda for today's meeting, and that will be the community safety and anti-social behaviour update. I have a further announcement that in pre-briefing, a member of the committee raised concern with myself with regards to social media information that I put out. I want to clarify that if I have put out where this item was put on the agenda purely by myself, I want to put that right publicly, that the work that is carried out in the interest of community safety and public protection is by the whole committee. I may have as chair highlight the issue and put it on the agenda, but it has to be done by the whole committee, and I recognise that. So just to clarify that, if you read anything on social media, it's the whole committee, even if it's said that I put it forward, which isn't inaccurate, but just to clarify. Right, item 3 on the agenda is the declarations of interest. So has any member got any interest on this agenda item this morning? I see none. That will take me on to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes from the last meeting, which took place on the 17th of February 2020, are attached on pages 3 to 8 of the agenda, and they are for approval. Does any member have any comments to make on the accuracy of the minutes, please? If not, can I have someone to propose they're accurate and a seconder for the minutes?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Dean. Okay. Item 5 is a new item on the agenda. It's the officer's announcement. We have included the officer's announcement onto our agenda going forward so that officers can provide any brief updates on elements of their work. Does any officer at this point have anything to raise as an update on for the members today, please? I see none. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is the community safety anti-social behaviour update. This is included on the agenda today for noting. There is a presentation attached to the agenda which officers will be taking us through, and then we will go to members for questions at the conclusion of the presentation. I will now hand over to Eleanor Wellington in the first instance to take us through this presentation. Over to you, Eleanor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I check before I start? I'd want to double check whether Chris or Claire wanted to come in at the start before I make my way through the presentation.
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah, over to you, Chris, please.
Thanks. Just for the information to the committee, really, this team, as part of the wider team, sits now under Education, Leisure and Lifelong Learning since January of this year. It was under the portfolio of the Deputy Chief Exec. I've got to know the team after the last sort of 5 or 6 months, and I'm already impressed with the work they've already done, and they continue to do across Neath Talbot in its entirety, not just in pockets of Neath Talbot. Their main role is to facilitate and coordinate a partnership approach to help any of the citizens and the people within Neath Talbot. They've got no enforcement powers. I wish they had, but they don't. So they work in conjunction with others to try and make things as better as they can. So I wanted to set the scene for you, Chair, first before the presentation.
Thank you for that, Chris. Any other officer before Eleanor?
Chair, if I might just come in there before Eleanor gives her presentation, and I don't wish to steal any of Eleanor's thunder because she's put a lot of work into this presentation, but it's just a thing to note for me is that community safety sits within the wider partnerships and community cohesion team, so has close links with, for example, the Area Planning Board Substance Misuse Commissioning and Development team. So the links with key partners are really inherent in the work that we do. Just to add that community safety is a small team, and as Chris said, it's about bringing people together, and we use tried and tested methodologies around a problem solving approach to address the root causes of the issues. I realise now I'm in danger of stealing Eleanor's presentation. So the only thing I would add, Chair, is that I think we can't underestimate how complicated and complex these issues are, and no one organisation has the solutions, and some of the solutions and some of the issues are really difficult. They're wicked issues, which will take time to solve. So with that then, Chair, could I hand over to Eleanor, please?
Before I come to you, Eleanor, I'm sure everyone can concur with the comments you have made, Claire, and obviously the wider communities. Today's meeting, while it's an update and may specifically look at Neath, it's Neath and Talbot that we have to deal with as a whole for antisocial behaviour, and that's the work that this committee embarks on. So over to you, Eleanor. Please, I'm sure Claire didn't steal your thunder.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Claire. I think it might be worthwhile, Chair, just to add really to what Chris and Claire have said before I go into the presentation. The community safety team, we are a very small team in the authority when you think of the authority as a whole. We're a team of 10 core members of staff, and then obviously myself who manages the service. Aside from just covering antisocial behaviour, we also look at domestic abuse, including the support of our highest risk victims. We cover hate crime, community cohesion, engagement events with the public, going into the schools to engage with young people. And of course, since the start of the pandemic, we've also had the responsibility of the Safe and Well service, which supported our most vulnerable residents. So we're a small number, so all things considered, we've got a lot going on. But this today now will give you a flavour of one particular area of work, which is the Neath Town Centre. You know, very high profile at the moment. There's a lot of attention from the public, from the press, and of course councillors yourselves will be aware that you get a lot of correspondence from the public. So hopefully we can shed a bit of light on some of what's going on, and as always we are open to suggestions and recommendations of how we move this forward. So I'll try and share this now in the hope that technology will be on our side.
Yes, it's there.
Yeah, it's there, is it? Lovely.
Yeah.
Okay. So the title of this obviously is Antisocial Behaviour Update, but it is specifically today just on the Neath Town Centre areas, which is of course at the members' requests. There's our details there, which of course we've already covered in the introduction. Okay, so just to give a little bit of background then, going back to July of last year, we were made aware, obviously, of ongoing concerns around antisocial behaviour in the Neath Town Centre area. In the main, this came to us through social media, which of course is something that officers become aware of usually in their own time as opposed to in work, because it's not a formal route of reporting into services. Residents and businesses have been speaking to many local councillors about issues of street drinking, noise nuisance, begging and other general antisocial behaviour. Of course, it was perceived that the cause of these issues was down to the usage of the Ambassador Hotel by our housing option service since the start of the pandemic. So as we go through the presentation, hopefully we'll be able to clear up on some of that around housing options. I don't work for the Housing Option Service, I used to, so I can try and answer some questions around some of that, but there may be some that we'll need to bring back at a later stage. So continuing with the background and the context, official reports to the police and to council staff were very, very low. In fact, at one point we were looking at single figures, and when we were looking at social media, it just wasn't a reflection really of what was actually happening in the town. So that was of huge concern to us. And I know when we come to the end of the presentation and police colleagues would like to give an input, it really is very, very important, and we cannot stress this enough, that members of the public report information through in the right way. There are a number of ways in which this can be done, because what happens is when we all try to pull together and look at solutions, if the evidence base and the statistics are not there to reflect what's actually happening, our powers are minimised really. There's far less we can do. So as well as, you know, getting the right response, it's to help us in how we can try and address some of these problems. So what we did then, as Chris alluded to and Claire, the community safety team's role is to call together the partnership. So whilst we may not have the powers ourselves, we can hold partners who do have the powers and the responsibilities, we can hold them to account. What we tried to do was get everybody around the table to better understand the problem, look at who was at the centre of the issues, again, which is another key element, consider an appropriate action plan to ensure that the situation improved and that it didn't deteriorate. So the first meeting was held in July 2020, as I've said, coordinated by us in Community Safety. Councillor Leanne Jones, our Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member, kindly chaired this meeting for us, and it was also attended by the relevant ward councillors and other Cabinet members. And then, of course, we heavily rely on our partner agencies, so we had representation from South Wales Police, Housing Options, WCADA, which is the local substance misuse support agency, licensing, both from the council and the police, our street care teams, the Salvation Army. At the time, it would have been the Neath BID, the Business Improvement District, but obviously that is no longer in place. The Business Crime Reduction Partnership, which sits with Community Safety, and many other partners. It has to be said that, well, from the outset and continues, partner buy-in around this is excellent. All subsequent meetings were very well attended, so it's not just a case of people turning up at the first meeting and then not really doing anything about it. There was a shared will from all partners to take action and to instigate change in the area. I think something that's probably quite important to note, Chair, there are an awful number of people, myself included, who sit around that virtual table and carrying out the work who are actually residents of the area themselves. So this matters to people from a personal and a professional context. You know, when we're not working at home, I work in the middle of the town centre, shop there, socialise there. So I completely understand residents' concerns and how important this is for us to get this right and make improvements. So what we did was decide to take a two-pronged approach. So we wanted to look at who was at the centre of the issues. Firstly, ensure that appropriate support was available for those people and that appropriate measures could be put in place to resolve the issues of antisocial behaviour. We're very keen on looking at the root causes. I mean, there are some approaches we could take which would perhaps go down a more sort of criminal route, which of course we do cover as well. But we've also got to remember we're dealing with some people who are incredibly vulnerable with complex needs, substance misuse, etc. So we have to look at this holistically and sort of take this two-pronged approach. As I've covered already, the other element of the work was to continue to encourage residents to report any issues through to the right channels to better equip us with the evidence that we need to address the problems. So what we did was we agreed a series of short-term immediate actions to address the current problem. And then we looked at longer-term, more strategic actions to ensure that the problems didn't come about again. Of course, there's an understanding by all, and this is councillors included, that this is not an overnight process. And, you know, you'll see that from the fact that we've been working on this since July of last year, and we are still dealing with issues that are getting a lot of attention, that are still problems ongoing. So there's a recognised element from partners. It's going to take considerable resource and effort from everybody. There's a need to work towards improving the public perception of the town. Of course, some of the issues are exacerbated by social media and can sometimes make the problem appear worse than it is. That is absolutely not us minimising the problem or trying to say that there isn't a problem, but sometimes we get incidents that happen that could happen anywhere. They have a lot of attention then on social media, which doesn't really help with the perception of the town and the work that people are trying to do to change that. So some initial actions we were taking, just to give a flavour, Chair, if I could, of some of the work that was undertaken. So we started with our licensing colleagues by asking them to visit all of the local licensed premises in the town centre to remind them of responsible selling and to brief them of the ongoing issues, because we appreciate that they can't be party to our meetings. Obviously, there are some issues that are confidential, but if they can at least be aware of what we're up against, and we can remind them, you know, not to sell maybe to our prolific offenders where they can, people who are already intoxicated, etc. So that was a piece of work that licensing helped us with. Our housing options team and South Wales Police colleagues who are on the call today will meet regularly to discuss and identify the individuals of most concern. Of course, that was really important because there were some concerns around the use of the ambassador. If those colleagues were able to meet and chat, we could talk about individual action plans for people and what we were looking to do. There was an increased police presence in the town, and as you'll see when we go further down the presentation, that continues. We had several press releases and social media reports, again to encourage the reporting through to the right channels, to allow all partners to have a true reflection of concerns and to have that hard evidence base to take further action against the people causing the problems. And then we looked at exploring options around Section 35 dispersal orders. So when there is an incident that the police are able to, resolve the problem. Issuing then of community protection warnings, community protection notices and criminal behaviour orders for those identified. So for people who are not familiar with those, and I'm sure police colleagues can interrupt if I'm not explaining this properly. Community protection notices, if you like, are the first stage in the process. So they are issued to those who are offending. Of course, if there's a breach of that, we then escalate that to a community protection notice. And again, if that is breached, we can look then to explore the option of a criminal behaviour order. And those orders can carry a prison term if they are breached. So they carry a lot of weight. But what we try to do is, coupled with that, make sure that the people of concern are also given the opportunity to access the right support, to make better choices, to change their ways, etc. But of course, we cannot always make people engage with those support services. One of the other things we tried to do then was to offer more diversionary activities and outreach support to those accommodated in the Ambassador. That was not without its challenges, because this was, of course, in the height of the pandemic, where services were hugely affected and impacted by home working arrangements, and of course the general health and safety with the transmission of the virus. So a couple of things have happened there with WCADA and various other services to try and give people activities to undertake, rather than them either being in a hotel room for the day or obviously out in the local area. So in terms of our longer term actions, again, this is just an example of some of those. It's been well publicised. There's a huge regeneration programme underway for the Neath Town Centre. It's a multi-million-pound development. Of course, one of the ideas behind this is to improve the general look and feel of the town, to encourage people to come in from outside, and just to generally make it a better place for our residents to live, work, socialise, etc. We've looked at the employment of more town centre staff to make sure that we've got an increased presence in the town, to consider longer term police operations to address the issues, and of course speaking to Welsh Government about funding to increase the provision of housing options temporary accommodation so that residents could be more dispersed. You know, it is well known that in March of last year, when the pandemic hit, we went into lockdown, Welsh Government put a requirement on all local authorities to accommodate anybody that was homeless at the time. Of course, the local authority have not got enough temporary accommodation of their own to accommodate those residents. So, of course, they had to go out to local hotels and other businesses to see if they could support. Of course, what happened is the NHS were using a lot of hotels locally to be able to house their staff who couldn't go home after shifts, etc., working on the COVID wards. So that limited the options. But of course, there are also some hotels that are just not prepared to work with the service at all. Of course, the Ambassador very kindly was able to help and has been utilised from the start of the pandemic. There is no change as yet with the homelessness legislation from Welsh Government. But of course, I know the Housing Options Service continue to lobby Welsh Government to look at increased funding so we can have alternative options of accommodation for people. Okay, some of the other actions continued to develop and implement a robust communications plan to make sure that we spread positive messages about the town, but also to continue to promote those reporting mechanisms. We've had excellent support from our communications team throughout this, and sometimes it's really important that we try to get as much positivity out there about the town to offset some of the negative press. And of course, to make sure that we're not sort of painting a picture to people outside of the town to deter them from coming in, shopping, to affect our local businesses, traders, etc. We look to resume our engagement events as soon as COVID restrictions allowed. So a huge part of what the community safety team does is go out there and engage with members of the public. We noticed a huge loss from not being able to do this throughout the last 12 months or so, because we get a lot of anecdotal information from traders, from residents. It's a really good way for us to understand where we need to focus our efforts, what campaigns we need to work on. And of course, we had to think of completely different ways to be able to do that. Luckily now we are in a position where we can go back out and engage with people, restrictions permitting. We look to revamp and extend our existing Business Crime Reduction Partnership, or BCRP for short, to look at further exclusions for prolific offenders and increased support for our traders. I know there are a number of people on this call today who would agree that the BCRP is one of the most effective tools we've got, but it's strength in numbers. So the more businesses we can have as part of the BCRP, the better tool it actually becomes for us. What happens with those meetings is panel members will come together, look at prolific offenders, look at their offences, and they can decide whether to exclude people from individual premises. Of course, if you can imagine, if every business in the Neath Town Centre was a part of that and decided to exclude people, we would effectively develop an exclusion zone in the town, which would be a real deterrent to people when it comes to antisocial behaviour. So this is very much a piece of work that we continue to chip away at. And of course, with the help of the police and local councillors, we can promote that even further. So the position in early 2021, by January, it was decided at that point that we'd meet less frequently. Some issues had subsided, but work was obviously continuing behind the scenes. And I think that's really important to note, that work has never stopped. It's just the frequency of how we met and looking at actions had decreased. What happened then was we had 2 isolated incidents that then took place. They were both unrelated to the ambassador, which police had confirmed for us, but they had an awful lot of social media attention. And of course, it did take the work back a considerable amount. Public perception of the town worsened again at this time. So it was decided with the Chair, Councillor Leanne Jones, that the frequency of the meetings would increase again. Initial actions were all revisited, and our longer term actions were brought forward wherever possible. South Wales Police obviously fully understood what we were up against as a partnership, and Inspector Matt Otterson, who's on the call today, was integral in starting Operation Lilium in March 2021, and that operation continues. So I think one of the things I'd like to say, when I prepared these slides, it was early last week, because you read them well in advance before these committees take place. What's happened since this is there's been another incident in the Neath Town Centre, which again has had a lot of social media attention. So this particular slide is slightly out of context, but I'll talk through it anyway. So up until the point of the week before last, we were having reports from traders and residents of a marked improvement, seeing more of a police presence, etc. From an Operation Lilium point of view, there was an increase in reports going through to the right channels, which was a huge positive, because that's what we need. This was made up of police actually on the ground, logging incidents whilst patrolling the town centre, but also through regular encouragement of businesses and residents to report their concerns. We were then at a point where reports were gradually decreasing, which is obviously what we want to see if we know things are going in the right direction. And traders were reporting an improved feel to the town, both to police and council staff. And membership of our Business Crime Reduction Partnership is increasing, with revised promotional literature and regular visits to traders. So, as I said just now, that piece of work will continue. Okay, so coming on to our next steps, Operation Lilium will be ongoing. This, of course, has got added strands to it, just to make sure that opportunities for support are explored before further action is taken. As I said earlier on, we've got to work really hard to get the right balance here. We are talking about incredibly vulnerable individuals. We've got to give them the opportunities to access support, as well as making sure that their behaviour is addressed. South Wales Police and Housing Options continue to meet to discuss those of most concern. I spoke to Emma, the manager of our Housing Options service this morning. She's confirmed that there are 31 residents in the ambassador at the moment, which is significantly less than what it has been in some weeks. The Business Crime Reduction Partnership and licensing are exploring whether we can make it a requirement for licensed premises to sign up to our scheme if appropriate. Because as I said earlier on, the more members we've got in the scheme, the better tool it is for us. Our comms plan implementation will continue, and we're looking at launching a web page, which will be around Neath Together, hashtag Neath Together, where residents and traders can go to see the latest developments on the work. A good way really for us to keep in touch with the public, as well as using our social media platforms. We have regular weekly briefings between officers and appropriate councillors. I meet very regularly with Councillor Leanne Jones. We've met with the leader of the council as well in recent weeks. And of course, yourself, Chair, you have weekly briefings from us on a Friday. Of course, this is open to other councillors as well. If they'd like to keep in touch with us, raise concerns, make recommendations, we'd obviously be open to that. The regeneration work of the town continues from our environment colleagues. Our engagement events have resumed as of May, and they will continue. We've got one next week in Neath, which obviously we will welcome. Welsh Government will continue to review changes to homelessness legislation that's been implemented since the start of the pandemic. Our outreach support will continue for those people accessing help from WCADA and the Salvation Army. And then with increased businesses signing up to the BCRP, we're hopeful that Neath Town Centre can become an exclusion zone with a zero tolerance to antisocial behaviour. As I said several times now in the presentation, the more businesses in the scheme, the more effective of a tool it becomes for us. That takes me to the end of the presentation. So what I'd like to do is, Chair, if you'd be willing, is for us to give the opportunity to our police colleagues if there's anything they'd like to add to what I've covered so far before we go into any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor. Before I go to our police colleagues, I'll bring in Cabinet Member Leanne Jones, who has raised her hand. Leanne?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Eleanor, for that very detailed presentation. I just want to offer my thanks on behalf of, you know, the community safety team. It's an excellent job, and I think you, Chris and Claire, have said it's a small team, but you're a dedicated, passionate team. You're all living in the county borough, and it's not just Neath that's been affected. We have spoken about other areas, but Neath is on the agenda today. And I think it's just highlighting the fact to members on this committee how important it is to us as members and how we want to move forward. Perception isn't always what it is out there on the ground. As we all know, social media can be a powerful tool on occasions, and then on other occasions it can be a deadly tool. So just wanted to say excellent presentation, Ellen. I think you covered everything well, explained everything in detail, what happened, and I think sometimes members don't realise what's actually happening on the ground. I know Councillor Hunt is fully aware of what's happening because he's the chair of the committee, but other members maybe not. But it just goes to show that we are listening, and it's not just us on this approach, it's a partnership approach. And I mean, we have to do it with the police, with a number of partners around that table. And you and I know, you know, from the meetings last year, how things have developed and how things have moved on, and how great a town we do actually have. We do want people to come to our towns to visit, workshop and play. So I for one, am extremely thankful for the work that the team is currently doing and ongoing. And just to say that we are listening, we do see everything. Social media, like I said, has its pros and cons, but we are trying our very best. I've always said it's not perfect, but we are trying and we are listening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. I'll finish the presentation before I go to questions. You mentioned the police officers want to make also a part presentation, Eleanor, is that correct?
I just want to offer the officers an opportunity if there's anything they'd like to add on the back of my presentation, because of course, you know, they've done huge amounts of work around this and initiating Operation Lilium. And of course, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, you know, we are talking about criminal activity, and the police are the ones with the powers to address some of that. And it's about trying to do that in partnership with our other partners, really. I can see that Matt has got his hand up to come in, and I think Temporary Chief Inspector Gareth Pross is also on the call.
There we are. Thank you, Eleanor. I didn't know Chief Inspector Prosser was here. Yeah, I'll go over to Matt, Inspector Matt Otterson now then first, please. Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick introduction for myself, for those who are not aware of me. I'm Matt Otterson. I'm the local police inspector for Neath and Pontardawe and the surrounding wards, 30 in all. So my role ultimately is to coordinate operational policing within those wards. So in respect of, I think probably a good start point would be to give an outline of what the recorded crime and ASB looks like in the ward covering the town centre, albeit it does also cover additional areas such as the Knoll and Fairyland, etc. But so I've looked at the statistics this week in terms, and I've compared them over the last 5 years. And what the statistics show, and they are statistics, and I appreciate they don't always show a full and true picture, is that this year, year to date, first 6 months of the year, recorded crime in Neath is at its lowest that it's been for the same period for the last 5 years. The majority of crime types are showing a reduction or certainly a similar picture. For example, if we look at increases, possession of drugs is showing as an increase this year. But however, that would show and highlight increased proactivity within that ward, because you only get recorded possession of drugs offences if officers have actually found that. So that in itself doesn't cause concern, and if anything is can be seen as a positive. In respect of antisocial behaviour, it's showing a marginal increase, say compared to 2016, for example. But then when you factor in that COVID incidents have obviously been quite prevalent over the last year. When you remove those COVID incidents, it actually shows a reduced recording of ASB for the same period for, compared to years gone by. When I say years gone by, we have to factor in that last year's an anomaly because of the lockdowns. Then there is a reduced reporting picture last year for ASB and crime. But then when you look at the years prior to that, 2016 onwards, this year isn't exceptional, and actually shows that we're actually lower than previous years. So that to me would say one or two things. Either we've got an underreporting issue, or we've got, as alluded to earlier on, a negative perception by many, fueled by social media posts, which we're all fully aware of, and adverse media, really. It could be either or, a combination of the both, that has led us to this situation where there's a lot of public concern around the town. So in relation to Operation Lilium, it launched at the beginning of April. It has had dedicated resource into the town during that time. So every day of the week since the beginning of April, there have been dedicated resources in that town. Those resources would be either PCSOs, police officers, or for the majority of the time, a combination of the both. Now, I'm not able to promise and kind of indicate that is 24/7 in the town. And as you can appreciate, I've got finite resources, and we've had to apply them, looking at the patterns and trying to apply them at the right times. So at times, yes, there would be locations within that town and times throughout the day where there aren't any police officers in the town. And that's something moving forward isn't going to change. But there have been dedicated resources in that town, and those resources will continue beyond this point. I've been managed to achieve additional funding to get additional resources in the town. We have had to supplement for resources from other wards on occasion. And we have utilised force resources. So you would have seen in the town our mounted section, our Operation Sceptre team are operating plainclothes operations, which have been very, very successful, particularly in respect of drugs and weapons. And again, all of those resources will continue to be utilised moving forward. Just to give you an idea of what sort of productivity we've achieved in the town, we have submitted 99 antisocial behaviour referrals since the operation's been running. Those identified as prolific offenders have moved on to be, as alluded earlier on to by Eleanor, they've been issued community protection warnings, which places conditions on them to behave effectively. They've been very successful by and large, and only one individual has kind of moved beyond that point to a notice, and has been arrested a number of times for breach of that notice, and we're now looking at a CBO in respect to that individual. So we are targeting, we're identifying and targeting who the main perpetrators are, and putting these measures in place to try and mitigate their behaviour. In all, we've arrested 48 individuals, and there have been a number of other outcomes: restorative justice, cannabis warnings, alcohol seizures, best part of 50 stop searches as well. And so we're aware of the an element of people are obviously subject to drug misuse. So there's lots going on in the town, and that will continue really. I think in terms of Neath town, the issues we are seeing are mirrored elsewhere in similar towns across South Wales. I don't think this is a Neath solely a Neath issue, and we've been working very, very closely with other agencies to address all the things going on. I've been out in the town personally with councillors and partners. My resources continue to engage with the partner agencies. We've really put a lot of effort into trying to get people to report. We are seeing people go into social media with videos and with incidents and not coming through to ourselves, and it's important to get that message out there that unless we are aware of these incidents, then it's very difficult to us to assess where to put our resources and who's causing the issues out there. So yeah, I think that pretty much summarises where we're at, really.
Thank you, Matt. Gareth, Chief Inspector, did you want to add anything before I go to members?
Yeah, morning, sir.
Gareth?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, a little bit muffled, but I think we're okay. Go on.
Yeah, there we are. I'll just open up my laptop chair. There we are. Just it was closed, so it may have just affected the sound. No, it's just basically to reiterate what Matt said, really. I mean, the figures there speak for themselves. We need to have a look at the ways in which we sort of the incidents are reported to us. So yesterday, we did send out different opportunities for the public to report incidents to us. Where there's been underreporting there, we need to increase that sort of reporting to us so we get a general picture across Neath as to whether the incidents that are being witnessed by the public are coming to our attention. In terms of because for my role within the BCA was to manage community safety, one of the issues I manage is antisocial behaviour across the BCA. One thing we have implemented with Operation Lilium is the use of the criminal behaviour orders, the criminal protection warnings and criminal protection notices, which Matt alluded to there, which have been very successful, because we've got to be sort of quite reticent of the fact that the majority of the offences that are taking place within Neath are sort of the lower level antisocial behaviour issues, which we are using the CPW's criminal protection warnings, criminal protection notices to deal with. That will result then in us being regressed along the system to the criminal behaviour order, which then gives us the opportunity to then put conditions on people. And we did have one successful CBO this week who went to court and has been, I believe, banned from the town centre. So it's an ongoing issue for us. We need to increase the sort of the reporting of the offences. A couple of things going forward now. We've also putting in a bid next week to the Home Office for the Safer Street 3 application, predominantly around violence against women and girls, to improve safety within the town centre of Neath and Talbot, where we're looking to increase that. So there is work going on, and I agree with Leanne that the work we do is certainly partnership orientated to get the results that we require. So our partnerships are well in place, and hopefully, with the joint strategy, we've got the Operation Lilium, which has been very successful. We'll be put stuff in place that will sort of, decrease antisocial behaviour within Neath. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Gareth. Before I go to the members' questions, then Claire, you got your hand up to come back. So over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just going to highlight, I suppose, given the mention has been made about substance misuse from the other parts of my team, is that at the start of the pandemic and during the pandemic, the Area Planning Board commissioned organisations like WCADA to do more outreach work, to go out and engage with people and to try and get people into services quicker and to receive the help they needed. So that has been, that proactive engagement and assertive outreach has been effective, and is something that we would hope to continue. In addition, we are aware that that sometimes it's not so easy to get into services, so we're currently doing a further review of how people can access services, and we hope to be finalising that by the autumn. The the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office has also been successful in obtaining additional funding around substance misuse and diversionary activities, and that might be something, Chair, you might like an update on at a future meeting, because I think it's very relevant to this discussion. And just then, as I suppose, as a wider picture, that the Area Planning Board has recently appointed a consultant to begin work on our major transformation project, which is all about getting the help and support that and people with substance misuse need. And obviously then if people can get that help, the impact on the community and their families and themselves is less. I just thought that would add to the picture, Chair.
Thank you, Claire, and I'm sure we would welcome any updates on substance misuse, and we'll take that forward in our forward work programme in the near future. So thank you for that. Okay, over to members now. I had indications in the pre-briefing. I see other hands up, but we'll get to you all. So I'll go over to Councillor Sheila Penry first, as she mentioned in pre-briefing. Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to congratulate Eleanor on her excellent presentation this morning. And she did answer part of my question, because my question was how many is staying in the ambassador at the present moment. But adding on to that, are they all from Neath Talbot, or are they from other areas under other authorities? Thanks, Claire.
Eleanor, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Claire, Eleanor, whoever.
Yeah, I can come in, that's no problem, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Penry, and thank you for your nice words there about the presentation. Just to confirm, with housing options, obviously it is a separate department within the authority, but we work very, very closely with them. So, yeah, as I said in the presentation, we've got 31 people accommodated there at the moment. I think the maximum capacity is mid-40s sort of number, but at the moment 31. With the homelessness legislation, the local authority has only got a duty to accommodate people who've got a local connection to the area. So, for example, if somebody were to make a presentation this morning with no sort of family connection, etc., to the Neath and Talbot area, they would be advised to go back to their own local authority and make a presentation there. Obviously, there are some exemptions to that. For example, if somebody's fleeing violence, domestic violence in particular, then obviously it would be imperative for them to move into a different area for safety reasons. But on the whole, it is generally people who've only got a local connection. I'm aware there's a lot of rumours circulating at the moment on social media about people from Cardiff, Newport, etc. But that is absolutely not the case. So there's factual information there from Housing Options that it is Neath and Talbot people only, if you like, unless in special circumstances. I think one of the other things that's really important to note while we're on the subject of housing options, generally I think people tend to think it's just one type of service. Actually, we get everybody from all walks of life speaking to our housing option service. We've had a number of people accommodated in the ambassador since March last year who perhaps through the pandemic have lost their job, maybe had a relationship breakdown, had fallings out with their families, etc. So have needed to access council services for help and support. But of course, there's a combination, isn't there? As with everything, people of all walks of life, there are some people who are incredibly vulnerable with addictions, etc., found themselves homeless. What we have had off the back of that as well is some real success stories. And I know that Wales Online worked with the ambassador and credit to the ambassador staff as well at how hard they've worked and how much they've supported housing options throughout a very challenging period. We've had a lot of success stories coming out of there, and people have had tenancies, some of them for the first time in years. So this has really given them an opportunity to have a roof over their head, engage with support properly for the first time in a long time. And they've now gone on to be housed in the borough and try to give them another opportunity at living differently and safely and well. So as well as the challenging stories that have come out over the last sort of 12, 15 months, I think it's really important that we think about the positives as well.
Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you, Sheila. The next indication is Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks all for the presentation today. I was going to wait for the presentation to see what sort of questions I was going to ask, but there's a couple of things I want to sort of make perhaps a general observation around the point raised around perhaps the perception and the reporting, the statistics, and I certainly think it's a bit of a mixture here. I think there is an underreporting issue, and I think our sort of tactic of raising awareness of those easier ways to report is definitely the right one, and I think we need to see the results of that before we can draw sort of a firm conclusion as to what, you know, what the real picture is there. But we've all had people come to us, and the chair will agree with me about 101 and the times to wait on the phone and everything else. So we've got, I believe there's QR codes now in the town centre, and we've shared information on the web form and the email. So hopefully that's going to help with this reporting issue a little bit. But I do find getting the public's sort of confidence and that reporting is going to do something is quite tricky. And I think we've all got to work together on that and just reassure the public that the reports help us. They help us in meetings like this. And again, that's no disrespect to the police, but if we had a load of reports, the police officers today would be saying something different to us. And I think it's important to reflect on that, and for the public to reflect on that as well. Is that it does really help us to highlight those issues. So yeah, I wanted to just flag that up. I think we just need to wait and see how those reports sort of carry on through. But the only other thing I wanted to kind of pick up on is obviously at the start of the presentation there were some dates there about, you know, work started last year, but of course issues in Neath Town Centre and antisocial behaviour, you know, didn't start last year. You know, we've been dealing with this as a committee for a while. There's been various different operations and perhaps focus on different areas. I remember we had particular issues around the bus station and substance misuse there going back a little while. And I kind of come at this from two angles. Number one, to kind of highlight that this is something that both the team and the committee and the police have been working on for a lot longer than last year. But also, it's finding that sustainable solution, isn't it? It's all well and good we get these operations that all got these fancy names and they last for a little while and maybe things calm down for a bit. But we seem to be coming back with operations and operations and operations. And yes, things are moving around and things are changing a little bit in character. But I'm sure what the public want is sort of that long-term sustained improvement. And I think that's what we kind of all want. And certainly from my perspective, I wouldn't want to see us next year with another operation with a different name, with a slightly different feel to it. Yeah. And just have this constant up and down, because the confidence of the public and of visitors and everybody else is only going to be achieved if we get that sustained, consistent improvement. And I haven't got the answer to that, but I kind of wanted to flag that up because this is something we've been grappling with for a very long time now. And in part, I think it's the access to services for those vulnerable people that's the big key for that. But most of this seems to be, in terms of the long-term issues, stemming from substance misuse. Certainly from the reports that I've had from the public and my experience in Neath. And thanks, Chair, and thanks all again for the presentations today.
Thank you, Sean. There's more statements in that than questions, Eleanor, but if you want to briefly cover some of the points you raised in what you are trying to do to deal with them. Yeah, Eleanor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Percy. I was trying to make notes as you were going then, so I don't want to miss anything. In terms of the public perception, yes, absolutely agree with you there. And it's about the balance, isn't it? You know, we're not at all minimising that there is a problem for us to contend with, but ultimately we need to make sure that, you know, we're not making things seem worse than they are, for example, and we need to encourage people to feel confident to report. And I don't know whether there's something for us to do really around continued press releases around, well, what happens when you contact 101? You know, what's the process? What other options have you got? We did a press release last week, and you know, myself, Councillor Leanne Jones, you know, other people on this call, we speak regularly about the public feedback and comments that are coming in, and it is that confidence and that understanding, really, isn't it, of what the process actually looks like and what it's doing. we completely understand there's a place for social media at the moment. You know, it's very well used by many of our residents and from us personally as well. So yes, by all means, if you want to take to social media, but you've got to tell the right people at the right time as well. And it is about building that evidence base. In terms of the longer term solutions that you mentioned, Councillor Percy, that's absolutely part of our plan. And as you've said, there's no clear answer. It's not something that one single agency can do on their own. It's something that we've got to do together. But we're trying to look at dealing with the problem in the here and now, but also looking at what our longer term, more sustainable options are, so that actually we don't have to sit and have presentations like this again about a different operation or about a flurry of incidents. And it's about recognising, I think, that everybody's got a shared responsibility here, whether it is councillors, community safety, the police, other departments, it's the public, it's the press. Everybody's got a role to play here in how we tackle these issues. And it's about getting that balance, really, isn't it? And I think something for us to really be mindful of as well, you know, we're sort of 10 years into a period of austerity where there have been cuts to various services. And ultimately, you know, that's always a problem that's kind of out of our control. We can apply for funding, we can lobby Welsh Government, you know, but if the additional resources and money don't come through, we often found ourselves trying to do more with less, which is a huge challenge, as you'll all know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. I know Sean wants to come back, but I'll leave Claire come back in again first on this subject, and then Sean can come back. Claire, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add to what Eleanor said, in that Karen Jones, our Chief Executive, has taken a keen interest in this and really has set all the partners a challenge of looking at more sustainable and long-term solutions, recognising the exact point that Councillor Percy made, that, you know, we have these different operations, we get the strategic group together. So we do have you know, the challenge of looking at more sustainable solutions. I'm not going to pretend that's going to be easy, although we have all of the answers, but, you know, we are and will be working on it. And I think, and just wanted to repeat the offer, Chair, given Councillor Percy's comments of coming back and doing a presentation about substance misuse.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Sean, you want to come back on some of the points?
Yeah, only briefly, Chair. Thanks, and thanks for that, Eleanor and Claire. Yeah, this is tricky, and I think in terms of the reporting to the police, this is a point I've raised with council services as well. It's about giving the public that full journey. If you report something, what has then happened as a result? And I think the comms side of this, and this is a point for the police to pick up as well, is how are they using that feedback? How are they using those reports? Is there a way, if somebody is calling into 101, if they're emailing, using the form, that they can get some feedback as to how their report has helped the police? And I raised this in a previous seminar we had with the police, because we get it with council services as well. Somebody reports a pothole. If they don't get told the pothole's filled, they don't know it's been done. And it's the same concept. If they call in to 101 and they leave the town centre, they don't know actually if anybody has paid any attention to that report or done anything about it. They're not going to stand there and wait. And I think there's something to be done there around that comms, just to make the public feel it's worth them taking the time to do it. And I just kind of wanted to reinforce that. But apart from that, I completely agree with what you both come back with. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Scott Barnsley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Say thanks for the presentation this morning. It's nice to see the good work that's been done in Neath, and you know, it's really encouraging. The point I'd like to make is that, you know, this sort of antisocial behaviour isn't exclusive to Neath Town Centre, but Talbot Town Centre, particularly Station Roads, not without its problems at the minute. I've seen an increase myself personally walking around town, and also I've had quite a lot of reports recently as well of you know, antisocial behaviour. As an example, yesterday I was shopping up Station Road yesterday, and as I was walking back down Station Road, one of the business owners called me over and said I just missed a fight by a couple of minutes that had gone on. And on the sort of point of reporting, I asked him, you know, has he reported? He said, oh no, I don't really know, you know, what to do. You know, why would I report it? So I tried to explain, what we mentioned today, the importance of reporting. So I'm hopeful he did. But when we're talking about reputation, I think if that fight was filmed yesterday, it would have done no end of damage to the town. Apparently there was kids there, mothers running away with the children. There's a new business set up there where you can have food outside. They all run back into the restaurant. He seemed to think it was kind of like a drug deal gone bad, but that's the type of thing we see in town. I've witnessed people urinating down the lanes by the side of Sweetman's. It's, it is getting bad there. So one of the questions I'd like to ask is, with this sort of extra resources, as has been alluded to, that's been put in Neath, have we taken our eye off the ball in Port Talbot somewhat? And, is there a potential of having a similar operation in Port Talbot Town Centre? On the point as well on the reporting, as you say, that was an example of a business owner witnessing something like that, didn't really know how to report it. So that's another big incident that could potentially have been missed if he hasn't reported it. So is there a way we can have another push to get perhaps posters out to all the businesses? As a councillor, I'm happy to go around and speak to them and explain the importance of reporting. So it's just a push for that really, and to say the statistics possibly don't represent what's actually happening on the ground there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Before I bring anybody in, can I just remind members to stick to the agenda item? I appreciate that antisocial behaviour is a Neath Talbot issue, and you make a good points in reference to the agenda item, Scott, where reporting crimes. So that's why I allowed it. But let's not distract from the agenda item this morning into other areas of the county borough. But because it
I appreciate that. Yeah.
But because it overlaps with some of the points of reporting on social media, I'm happy to allow it. Just remind members to stick to the agenda item, please. Eleanor, if you wanted to briefly answer those points. Thank you.
Yes, I certainly can. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bamsey. Just to offer you some reassurance, really, I think it's important, really, that you have raised the question, to be honest, because as a team, when we look at antisocial behaviour, we are not just talking about Neath in general. Our team cover the whole of the borough. So we have got pockets of antisocial behaviour in Pontardawe, in Port Talbot, Britton Ferry, and there's various sort of strands of work ongoing, and our own version of operations, if you like, for targeting some of those problems. Just last week, Councillor Leanne Jones, our antisocial behaviour officer, business crime officer, they were in Station Road speaking to businesses, speaking to Roger from the Business Improvement District of Eva Port Talbot, as it is there. We're very, very much aware of what is going on, and we had a similar subgroup, the same that we've got for Neath. We've got the same for Port Talbot. So, of course, if at any point the Scrutiny Committee would like us to present on that, we'd be more than happy to come and share what's going on in that area of our borough as well.
Thank you, Eleanor. I see the cabinet member got a hand up, but I'll go to Inspector Mark Otterson first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief one, just to offer some assurances. The Port Talbot policing sector sits aside from this policing sector. So in terms of proactive resourcing, we do not take any resources across. So just to assure you that the work ongoing in Neath Town Centre is not to the detriment of any proactive resources in the Port Talbot area. In relation to the wider issue, obviously it's not my area. And maybe not for this forum, but maybe that's something that can be looked at outside of that. But just to offer that assurance as well.
Okay,
thank you,
thanks.
Leanne, is this in relationship to what Scott has said?
Yeah, only quick, and just to reiterate what Eleanor said, and to let Councillor Bamsey know, we're fully aware of the issue problems in other areas. Port Talbot is very much on our radar, and I'm linking in with South Wales Police down in Port Talbot as well. So just to make you aware that because this Neath Town Centre is on the agenda, we certainly haven't taken our eye off the ball in Port Talbot.
Okay,
thank you, Leanne.
Thanks. If I could just come back with one more question, Chair, if I may. With regards to the exclusion zone, with a zero tolerance to antisocial behaviour, is there plans to extend that to like Port Talbot, particularly Station Road as well? Because I think that it'd be very welcome. I believe.
And Councillor Bamsey, this is a agenda item. I mean, if one of the officers wants to answer it, I'm happy for them to do so. But we're talking about a different question today. But does an officer want to answer that?
Yes, I'm happy to, Chair, no problem. Again, it's an assurance to Councillor Bamsey, whatever approach we take in Neath, it is a tried and tested approach that we would take anywhere. So our business crime officer was actually on the walkabout in Talbot last week. He's regularly visiting there to try and encourage businesses to sign up. Viva Talbot are also aware and help us to promote. Exactly the same in Neath, it's strength in numbers. The more people that sign up to that partnership, the better tool it becomes. And if we're looking at complete exclusions for people from various premises in Neath, we could also do the same in Talbot.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Before I go to other members, Chloe, you wanted to come in, please? Democratic Service.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just on the relation of the agenda item. Yeah, members basically asked for this particular item to be put on the agenda for today due to the current ongoings and the high profileness of Neath. But we've also got on the 17th of December meeting an update on antisocial behaviour in all areas. So we've got Port Talbot, you know, Neath, like any area that is relation to antisocial behaviour in the county borough. So just to give the assurances that we've got that on our agenda for future meetings.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chloe. And I would have thought members would have been aware of that. And that's why I'm trying to specifically tackle the agenda item. That
appreciate that, Chair. Yeah.
No, it's fine, Scott. No,
I just thought, that's December. I thought, it's such an issue. I mean, I took this opportunity this morning to bring this up because something, I feel strongly about.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not criticising you. I'm just trying to get members back to concentrate on the agenda item in hand. I'm sure we can have those conversations and debates at future meetings as well, ongoing. Thank you, Chloe. Sean, was your hand back up to come back to in relationship to this question before I move on to further questions? Sean, please.
Yeah, no, Chloe stole my thunder a little bit, but no, obviously when we had the forward work programme workshop, this was one of the discussions we had was around antisocial behaviour in other town centres and other areas, and I don't know, I can't remember who was present altogether, but we discussed Port Talbot, etc. I was going to say we can have a chat in the forward work programme part of the agenda. I think there may be a case to bringing that meeting forward from December, because it was one of the things I raised in the forward work programme workshop was the Neath stuff is great, but we need to make sure that we're not losing focus on the other areas because the committee is a county-wide committee, and that was just something I wanted to reiterate. And perhaps members from the concerned about Talbot Town Centre can we can have a discussion in the forward work programme part of the agenda if there's a possibility of bringing that forward on the agenda to a sooner meeting, because I support that.
Yeah, I think we all support that. Thank you, Sean. Right, back to business in hand. Councillor Nigel next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Eleanor and Matt for their reports. They were eloquent and their clarity, so thanks for that. I got a few questions. I'll try and keep it brief because this conjures up so many questions about the business in a town centre. So I know at ground level how problematic this was, and I'm grateful for Leanne and everyone who came to see me last week when they did in fact visit Port Talbot and seen things firsthand. So do we have the available antisocial behaviour stats for all wards for the previous few months? Could that be made available to members so we can see, kind of get a context of where the antisocial behaviour is taking place throughout the county? Is the issues we talk about here, is it mainly like street drinking, or are we talking about county lines, or is it a bit of both? Because I know it's both in our town centre. Do we also believe it's the same group of people that are causing these problems? I was quite surprised at how there's 99 community orders in Neath. That's a lot. I thought it would have been a lot less. But do you think there's, it's the same group of people that are causing these issues? And do you think that we have sufficient powers to get on top of it? And the stop and search, are they effective? I'd like to ask that. Furthermore, will members who've had county lines sentences imposed in their wards, will we be notified when the perpetrators are released from prison? Because that's a concern for me personally, and I'm sure it is for those in the central Neath areas. Eleanor mentioned about regeneration in the town centres and how much is needed. And I'd like to know whether you were consulted with the Levelling Up Fund when monies became available for town centre regeneration recently, actually, in the last month or two. Were you consulted on that? 'Cause I'm sure you would have had many ideas of how we could have regenerated our towns for the benefit of our communities, the businesses, and the residents and visitors. And just the last thing I'd like to ask really is, I'd like to compare really. We were hearing a lot about the ambassador in Neath, and that is in the centre of Neath. Now, I know it does provide a good service, but is that the appropriate location? You compare that with the LA Riding Centre in Goitra, where most homeless people have been taken. In Talbot, I think, you know, and I'm sure Rachel Taylor will know more about that, but because it's in quite a rural area, it's taken out of the town centres. I think we benefited from that. I don't know whether the antisocial behaviour statistics are going to bear up, but do you think, I'd like that to go to Matt and Eleanor actually, and Leanne, that the LA, being in its location, is a better choice for housing the people as opposed to the ambassador where they're in the town centre? Okay, so I hope that's not too much, but that's.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you, Nigel. Eleanor, I hope you was able to jot down all those questions, and I'm sure you can rely on your colleagues to answer.
I can repeat them if you wish.
No, you're all right, Nigel. I'm sure they'll be covered. If not, you can come back if they miss something. So, Eleanor, over to you to start then, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. There's going to be quite a few of those questions that are probably better answered by police colleagues, particularly in terms of stats, county lines, and obviously members being notified when people are released from prison, etc. So I'll cover some of that, but I think we'll be relying on police colleagues to come in for the majority. In terms of statistics, we have quarterly reports of all stats coming into our Community Safety Partnership Board. By all means, we're able to share the ASB stats with our councillors if they so wish. The only thing I would remind you of is to consider that it's not necessarily reflective of the actual scale of the problem, because underreporting is a huge issue, and that's across the board. So that's whether we're looking at domestic abuse, antisocial behaviour, whether we're talking about Neath, Talbot, Avon Valleys. It's an issue across the board, whether it's down to confidence. Some people don't like to report, some people don't like to get involved, they worry that they might be called upon for statements, all those kind of things. So we always look at the stats, and obviously we always get a bit of context put around them from our police colleagues, but that's something just for you to keep in mind when you do see them. Don't take them as read, because we know there's a problem with underreporting across the board. In terms of your question around, is it the same people? We've had over 200 people through the doors of the ambassador since March of last year. I can get you the exact figure, but it's over 200. I think it's really important to note, particularly when it comes to public perception, not all of the problems are related to the ambassador. In fact, some of the highest profile incidents that we've seen that have had a lot of attention on social media, speaking to Sergeant Mark Watkins, Inspector Mark Otterson, immediately able to confirm that they were not residents of the ambassador, and in some instances not known to the Housing Option Service at all. But of course, that's not to say that that's not the case for every incident. And again, I don't want that to seem that we're minimising it, but we've got to get that factual information out there about what we're dealing with. In terms of the use of the ambassador and comparing that to the LNA Centre in Goitra, again, as I alluded to in the presentation, our Housing Option Service, who are not on the call today, they are really up against it when it comes to local hotels and accommodation provision actually engaging with them. So as it stands, the only options they've got are the ambassador and the LNA Centre. And of course, until Welsh Government change their directive on accommodating people, those services are probably likely to remain. And I know Councillor Rachel Taylor will back me up here on this point. The LNA Centre has not been without its issues either. In fact, our team are going to the Wildbrook estate in Talbot and Tregoitra on Monday to be able to engage with residents and talk to them about crime prevention, reporting antisocial behaviour. But there are, of course, a number of other factors as well, like road safety, littering, dog fouling, etc. And of course, our team go to kind of represent the authority and then pass the relevant information on to other teams. So whilst I understand, you might be looking at the LNA Centre as a better alternative, I think we're looking at very similar issues, and of course the limited space as well. So one of the things we need to continue to do is speak to Welsh Government about the changes to the legislation, the pressures that that's actually put on the local authority to provide accommodation for people when their options are limited. Normally, they would look to use perhaps bed and breakfast accommodation in Swansea, but of course Swansea are subject to the same legislation, so they've got the same struggles that we have in trying to accommodate everybody that comes to their service. I think that's probably what I can cover, Chair, and Councillor Hunt, and whether police colleagues are able to come in on the remainder, if that would be okay.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. And Matt, I don't know if because of data protection and information, but can you just sort of briefly speak about the Councillor Hunt's question regarding those that come out and where they go back to, if you could?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll certainly do my best. Okay, it was an ask to comment on the location. I don't cover the Talbot area, so I don't know what the picture looks like around LNA, and I think Ellen has probably given a far better and more informed account around that. So there's nothing further. In relation to the problems we see in the county lines picture is low. So we've done a very good job at keeping county lines at bay within the Neath area. I'm not saying it doesn't creep in or it doesn't. It isn't going on, but certainly the intelligence picture would suggest that it's not a major issue, and certainly in terms of the stats we've been talking about, it doesn't really feature and contribute to any great extent within that. In terms of the problems, I can give you a snapshot of what was reported. So if we look at an average week, well, I've got the details here in front of me. We look at maybe a sprinkler shoplifting, a couple of fights in the town, and yeah, just that general sort of people under the influence causing ASB. That is maybe the week before last. That's what it looked like. It's not significant in terms of the volume, and that's the sort of general stuff that we are seeing. We see an ASB sometimes escalating into sort of low-level disturbance on the streets, and then the crimes such as shoplifting have always been part of town centre policing, unfortunately. So yeah, that's the sort of general stuff that we see in. Is it the same group of people? I noticed you referred to the 99 ASB referrals that we'd made. That's not 99 different individuals. That is individual referrals. So some of those might be have repeat referrals for them. What we then do is identify those who are coming time and time again, the prolific repeat offenders, and that is the ones then that have escalated to the community protection warnings and notices and CBOs. So we concentrate on them. The ASB referrals are the mechanism to identify them as such. So there would be a lot of people who have been had referrals in who might have just had one-off incidents. It does. We are seeing an evolution in terms of, so it's not necessarily the same group of people at the start of the operation that are still there. We are seeing some drop off and some come on, unfortunately, and so it is evolving. But our processes allow us to kind of capture that quite quickly and then start to put in some mitigation. Ties into your question around, do we have sufficient powers? And there are sufficient powers to deal with this, and those are the powers that we've kind of discussed. We've got to consider proportionality. There are a lot of people within the town who may not be presenting well and may be upsetting people in terms of the way they look or what they're doing or where they're standing, but not necessarily committing any offences. And again, we've got to be policing that proportionately. So that's in respect to that. Have I covered everything there?
I think you have, Nigel.
I think there was actually stop search powers you mentioned as well. Are they effective? Yes. We've had arrests within the last few weeks, drug dealers within the town from proactive operations that are going in. Our Operation Scepter are very, very effective at coming into town. They can come in at any point and they will identify people with drugs and dealing drugs. And as I say, we've had a dealer on the Blue Bridge within the last few weeks. So yes, it is effective and that work's ongoing.
Thank you, Matt. Nigel, okay?
Yeah, Steve, I'm very pleased with the replies. I just like to say with Eleanor, I wasn't specifically talking about the Ambassador Hotel residents. What I meant was, are the people who are committing antisocial behaviour in our town centres, are they a small group of people who are re-offending? I also absolutely get what Matt is saying in that it does evolve, because we're seeing that year that it does change the group of people who are offending. I mean, some of them have passed away, you know, but it does constantly evolve. I do worry about sometimes whether we do have sufficient powers, and you know, I think stop and search could be effective at times on some of the repeat offenders, because we know who they are, like who are constantly there. And I'm sure it's very similar in Neath and Pontardawe or any other sort of areas where we have this issue. So I would advocate a bit more of that. I'd like to know whether members will be notified about people being released from prison. Maybe not in this forum, but I would like to know about that. And just one last thing I'd like to bring up. I was really interested in the BCRP in Neath and how it involves businesses reporting, and I would like to see that extended to other areas, because I think that would really be effective, because a lot of businesses are turning black, they don't know what to do. So I think that, like Scott said earlier, we would like to see that. I'm glad to see a success in Neath. So I'd like to thank you both for the final time for the work you're doing, keep us informed, and to Leanne for the work that she does. I know she gets a bit of grief on social media, but I know that she's doing some very good work. So keep it up, everybody.
Yeah,
thanks.
Thank you for that, Nigel. And I'm sure it will be extended, but I think Leanne's wants to answer that. So, Leanne?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Hunt, as regards to the BCRP, I know Eleanor's got a hand up now, but it is available to all across Neath Talbot. So it's something that was mentioned again last week when we were out in the Talbot Town Centre. So the Grant Bottrell, who is the BCRP manager, is working closely with businesses to see who wants to come on board. So we are back in the town revisiting, as we are in Neath, and we are working with licensing as well to get to licensed premises. And appreciate your comments and support, Councillor Hunt. Thank you.
Yeah. Eleanor, did you want to elaborate?
Yes, Leanne has pretty much covered it there. But yeah, the BCRP is already available in Talbot. We're just trying to do some more work now to market it differently, get out to businesses, make sure they're aware of what it is and the benefits of being part of that. You know, it allows the stores to have StoreNet radios. The police or local PCSOs have also got a radio, so they can get up-to-date direct information from stores that are signed up to the scheme. They're also able to have photographs of prolific offenders, so they know then when they're in work, if they maybe see somebody, they need to report it through, or you know, anything like that. It's a really good network, and it creates a bit of a community then amongst the stores as well. But of course, if you've only got a handful of people in it, it's not as effective as it would be if we had a lot of people in it. And again, it's a function that sits within the community safety team, so we are able to influence some of what that looks like and how we can market it. Features heavily in the comms plan for the Neath Town Centre, and just as an assurance, as per Talbot councillors, we will look to do the same over your side as well, shall we say.
Thank you, Eleanor. Sean, is this on this subject? Yeah, go on then.
Yeah, yes, Chair. Something I forgot to mention earlier was in terms of what some of the barriers are in terms of signing the businesses up to that scheme. And I was just wondering, you know, are there costs, etc., associated with, you know, becoming a member and having the radios and everything else? So, and I just meant to ask what some of the issues were in terms of getting more people signed up.
Eleanor, have we got an answer for that?
Yes, I have indeed, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Percy. Yes, there is a cost to the scheme, and there are a number of different options for businesses. We're really conscious that we've got a lot of small independent traders in all of our town centre areas. So we want to make sure that something that's accessible to the bigger traders, perhaps the chains, is equally as accessible to our smaller businesses. The BCRP locally is actually part of a much wider national network. So there are these schemes right across the country in England and Wales, and we're trying to learn as being part of that network how other people kind of get around these things. But of course, if we have got barriers, we'd like the traders to come to us and tell us what is preventing them from signing up, and if there are things we can do to try and help or modify the product that we've got, then obviously we can look to do that as well.
Thank you, Eleanor. Yeah. Councillor Dean Causey then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Forgotten what meeting I was in.
Dean, you did tell me to come to you last.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Eleanor. Excellent presentation, and good to see the details of what's going on. We've talked a lot about changing public perception, which of course is right and proper. But I think we've got to be cautious, because I think the danger there is that we sort of suggesting there's a public perception that there's antisocial behaviour in Neath, and we are sort of saying that there isn't. You know, I'm not saying that we are saying that, but we could be accused of saying that or suggesting that. I think there are problems, as we know. We wouldn't be here talking about them otherwise. And I'll talk in just a second about that particularly. But I would go beyond just trying to change public perception. I think we have to change the narrative. And the narrative, of course, at the moment is that people who visit the town are going to be unsafe. They feel unsafe. There are people marauding around the streets, wanting to beat people up and mug people, and there's people there drunk and disorderly all the time. And of course, and the other part of that is that it's not being policed. And of course, that's not the case. There's a specific issue around misconception of the ambassador has been highlighted. It's frustrating, I find. I mean, you know, I see a lot of this in my day job, where we get contacted by people who are suggesting these things, suggesting exactly this narrative. Now, if you had an event like the food and drink festival, or you know, the fair or something, and the police say, oh, do you know what? We're not going to police that. We're just going to put a couple of police officers there, and then a riot broke out or whatever, you know, something bad happened, then, you know, people would be quite correct to flag these issues up. However, it isn't about the policing of events. What we see often is random acts of antisocial behaviour or violence, and often amongst people, groups of people who know each other. And, you know, if I was standing in the street with you, Chair, and, you know, I take umbrage over something you say and decide to start punching you in the face, how on earth is the police ever going to predict that? They're not. They don't have a crystal ball, and neither do any of our officers. What has been flagged is the reporting of these incidents, and that is absolutely paramount, that we need constant communication with the public to promote ways of reporting these things. Facebook is not a way of reporting these things, and you know, it is immensely frustrating where you see these videos that appear. You know, I don't particularly use social media a lot, but I get to see them, as you can imagine, because people share them on the pub and that. And you know, you see these videos where there's someone there filming and they're saying, what do we do? What do we do? Well, start with switching the video off and using the telephone as a telephone to report it. That would be a good start. But of course, what we must remember is the local policing teams do have capacity issues, and you know, Inspector Otterson has already flagged that up. And let's not forget, I mean, Ella touched upon it. The period between 2010 and 2020, there were 23,500 police officers cut from England and Wales. Right? Let that sink in for a minute. It's astonishing. And whilst I totally agree that you have to have a positive message about the town, of course, and there's lots of really good work that happens. We've also got to be honest with people, and we've got to be honest about why some of these things happen in the first place. And it would be good, and this is a question, it would be good to have a piece of work done, I don't know if it's possible, where we can actually list what has been cut since 2010. Youth workers, youth offending team staff, community development, communities first, funding for charities, youth justice funding, community drug and alcohol services, rehabilitation services, probation services. All of these things have been cut to some degree or another. And it would be good getting on top of that and helping communicate that to the public. It's good for us and it's good for the public, I think, because we all need to understand the challenges that we face, and we need to understand why we face these challenges. Over £100 million, I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, have been cut from council budget, and that's been cut because over £1 billion has been cut from Welsh Government budget, and it all starts in Westminster. It all starts with Tory austerity in 2010, and you know it's like saying it's like eating 3 cheesecakes a day and wondering why you're putting on weight. You know, that's the analogy I would use. You know, how can you sit here and complain about everything that's happened without actually realizing why it's happened? You know, we've got all this funding cut, and antisocial behaviour has increased. You know, we're dealing with these issues, of course. However, this is the important point. There is lots and lots of really good stuff happening despite the cuts. Look at Welsh Government's commitment to PCSOs. Look at our own small yet committed community safety team doing absolutely astonishing work. And we need to celebrate that. And this is part of changing this narrative. We need to tell people, we need to be honest with people about what cuts have happened, and we need to explain to people what we're doing. And just to finish, Chair, what I would ask is that we explore the viability of a sort of Times Square alliance model. Now, if you're not familiar with Times Square alliance, I suggest you have a look at it. It is absolutely superb. I know you might, you know, chuckle at the difference in scale, but actually the cornerstones of practice can be exactly the same, right? It was set up in 1992 as a bit of a forerunner to the broken windows theory work that you know became associated with New York, and it's fantastic. And you know, one of their main priorities is public safety, and they have these ambassadors, these public safety officers, and we've talked in the presentation about increased funding, about more town centre staff. And I think, you know, if we can rebrand some of this work, I mean, the name alone instills confidence, doesn't it? You know, the word alliance, you know, it conjures up unity and strength and cooperation. And I think often what we find is there's so many, I'm getting confused myself, you know, we've got Neath Talbot Council responsible for some things, Neath Town Council, the consortium, the bid when it was about the police, right? There's all these different things, and there's all these words that actually become meaningless over time. Then words like partnership working and all this sort of stuff. And I think in terms of changing that narrative, you know, there's an opportunity to sort of simplify the organizational landscape and get people to coalesce around the message. You know, it is a message about reporting, and it, you know, it could be about businesses funding it. I know we've said goodbye to the bid for the moment, but you know, it could be about businesses funding it. It could be crowdfunded. It could be volunteers. You know, you go to, I don't know if you visited New York, but they're there in these snazzy jackets, and it you know, it just brings a confidence to the place. You know, and they work very closely with NYPD, and we could be. I would ask, I would urge you to look at that model, just explore it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Causey. I think we need to send you to Parliament to speak on our behalf. Made a lot of excellent points there, and I'm sure Eleanor is going to respond to some of the questions that she dug out of your wonderful speech. Eleanor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Causey. The cheesecake analogy did make me chuckle. I think one of the points that you've raised, and perhaps the most important thing for me to focus on, yes, in terms of budget cuts, you're absolutely spot on, particularly for our police colleagues as well. But one of the things I want to touch upon is what you've said about perception. I want to be absolutely clear that when we talk about public perception, we're not talking about the fact that we are trying to say there isn't a problem here, because there absolutely is. It's the fact that there is a lot of work going on to tackle the problem. And I think sometimes public perception is that nothing is going on or nothing is happening. And we need to change public perception for them to actually see that, yes, what was in the press release last week, what we've discussed this morning, what's in the presentation, there is an awful lot of work going on. There is never a straightforward answer to these kind of things. We're using tried and tested approaches that have worked with other local authority areas, that we have utilised in the past, of years gone by. So it's about, I think when we talk about public perception, yes, we've got to talk about under-reporting. We've got to have reports to reflect what's going on, but we've got to get factual information out there to members of the public. Things like rumours around the usage of the ambassador, things like the uses of illicit substances on the streets. If we can actually put some of those rumours to bed and factual information out there, and I was speaking to Councillor Leanne Jones last week, we put the press release out there and I'd said, look, we're going to dedicate an officer this afternoon and in the morning to look at the comments that are coming in from the public. It's something that I usually do in my own time, to have a look at kind of what's coming in, when you're scrolling through Facebook. And I know many people are exactly the same. Where we sometimes fall down is that we don't go back and answer the public immediately, and then the rumour mill is left to turn. Comments will come in, what's happening with this, what's happening with that, and we seem to be saying nothing. So I'd said specifically for one of our community safety officers from our Facebook page to be there on hand with responses that are not standard copy and paste responses, that we're going back with factual information, either about housing, the ambassador, police responses, Operation Lilium, you name it, so that we're actually able to go back and try and settle public perception, so that people are actually looking at the facts about what's going on, and that people do understand we are working towards this. To quote Councillor Leanne Jones, she'll say, we don't always get it right, we're not always perfect, we get that, and there is so much more to be done, but it's something that not one single agency can do alone. We've got to do it together with other agencies, and that includes the public as well, the role that they've got to play there in telling us about what's going on, making suggestions, contacting councillors, etc. It's across the board, isn't it? So yeah, I absolutely agree with you there.
Thank you, Eleanor. Inspector Otterson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of bring up the point around managing expectations of when people do actually call South Wales Police, the expectations around that, because depending on the nature of the call, obviously that gets triaged at our public service centre. Decisions will be made whether it needs to be recorded or not, and then a decision and a risk assessment applied as to what response we're going to afford that. Some incidents reported might well be closed down at source following that assessment. Some may be referred to our incident resolution team, who will deem fit to certainly deal with that by phone if possible. Some then will come down, filter down locally at various grades. So I think we've put out some media around this in the last few days. Really, is to try and manage those expectations and from persons calling, but that shouldn't be a deterrent for them calling, because at a minimum, if their call is logged and it's valid, that then gives us a reporting picture to apply our resources. So yes, they might not have a police car roll up within a few minutes of their call, but there's a record of that on our system. And it goes back to what we said at the start, that if you look at the reporting picture, there isn't any escalation as such of ASB and crime in Neath, according to the reporting picture. So if the reality isn't that, then we need the help of the public to make those calls, to refer through the multitude of mechanisms, and it's not just about a phone. There are far more quicker and efficient ways that can be done. but that allows us then to have that real picture of what's going on. But it's that managing that expectation as well. You know, that their phone call may be useful and valid, but may not necessarily get an immediate response. So.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Yeah. Any other member? I don't see no hands raised. Any member want to ask a question on the presentation now before I give my own? No, I don't see no hands. Okay. Obviously, I would say a lot of good points raised by members, good scrutiny, excellent presentation. It identifies and shows the work that is ongoing. Eleanor, you're a credit to the authority and the team. With a small team, the work you're doing. So are the police, so is the cabinet member. Everybody's working, you mentioned, in partnership. It's important that this is continued. We have to take the communities with us. Dean, you raised some very superlative, exceptional points that I concur with, as do I with many other members in the addresses. But I'm going to raise some issues that have come directly from the public. It's important that we have a broader view. You mentioned that reporting, and you mentioned that it's important, and I concur with that, and it is. But let's put some meat on the bone, as they say. For instance, this Leanne, you can probably come back with some of the points I might raise later on. Is that you mentioned the town partnership meeting, and it's key. Partnership working and communication is vital, yet the chair and vice chair of this committee are not part of that partnership. I think that would be something that is essential for Neath and Talbot as a council, that myself and the vice chair should be included in that partnership meeting. Moving on to the 101s now. Matt touched on it and other members, and Sean earlier. Previously, when I addressed the 101 and visited the call centre in Bridgend, as you know, we had wrong information given to us by the police that 93% of calls were managed. Now, when the actual figure was in the 60s, 68% if I recollect it, or maybe a little bit lower. Now, why I'm mentioning that is that the resident, Peter, said to me, and I quote, tried all day, I pressed the button for a call back, didn't receive a call back, spent 6 hours, 3 calls placed, nobody answered, so I gave up. Again, they mentioned, Matt, I think you answered this with regards to the call centre. What he was asking then, is it a position of, are they asking questions with calls when they do get through? Is it a case of his words? These are not my words, these are questions and from members of the public. Neath kicking off again, so it's not a priority. Obviously, I've answered that question. Of course, all calls are dealt with, as Matt said, in a priority. Now, we mentioned resources, and Dean is quite right when Westminster obviously hold the purse strings and they've cut police officers. But I'm not aware if this is a factual. Maybe Leanne could answer me this, or the police. But what they're saying is that 34.5% comes from Westminster, and 47% of police funding comes from budgets in Wales, council tax from authorities, and 18.6% comes from the Welsh Government. Now, I haven't had time to check that out, so I don't know if that's true. But why I'm raising it is that if funding to the police is a three-way split, whether them figures are accurate or not, it's important that we resource the police to carry out the work that they do. You know, it's vital that we do get these figures right and help the residents in the way they want to see it. Another one said, anything that improves Neath Town Centre would be welcome. Never did I think I would feel unsafe walking through my hometown. I did it today. It is completely overrun, shouting, swearing, openly drinking in the streets. I felt so incredibly sorry for all the hard-working people trying to run businesses. They asked me to raise a point on CCTV. I know Chris is here with us today, but and it's part of a forward work programme and that we'll touch on later. But they wanted to know that obviously if you had the CCTV, that could be an excellent tool with quality pictures to prosecute, even if the police cannot get there, of course. And I think we would all agree with that. So it'd be a manned. Another one meant I drove past the house in the Melon, getting identified several times, various incidents. Passed the guy yesterday in working clothes, high-vis jacket, was scoring. I saw occupants giving him something and he was holding a £20 note. Today, a girl hammering the door, trying to look through the letterbox, money in hand. Surely this is easy for police, or am I missing something? Is there a drug squad? So, Matt, on the incident that we've alluded to today, give us an elaborate response, and I'm not going to go through it all, but it's just about resources. I'm tackling the resource issue here. He said a 999 call was received at 1842, related to the matter in Neath, as we're all aware of, the one by the station and in that vicinity by the banks. There was no officers in the town centre at the time due to the local neighbourhood officers being off. There was an earlier present and our response officers was heavily committed. The matter had to be attended by officers from Port Talbot, who arrived on the scene approximately 20 minutes later. Now, this is a 999 call that took 20 minutes to respond to. We don't know the details, and luckily nobody was seriously hurt. So that was something that was, quite alarming. Again, it's resources. I'm going to stick to this resources. I'm not criticising the police. I'm not criticising the council, and I'm not criticising all those who are working for these outcomes. I take on board what you've all said today. I understand and I support, but we need to get better resources. We need to lobby Westminster governments. We need to lobby Welsh governments. I know Leanne, you with our finance officer are doing this, and it's key. We need more money for the police. Matt isn't the only one who have alluded to me that if we had the resources, we could potentially do a better job. They are doing the best with what they have. Nobody is disputing that, but I think people are concerned. I could give you loads more examples, but I'm not going to bore. I'm giving you a flavour of what is going on. And in 2015 and 16, as most of you will be aware, when I held a public meeting in Neath Rugby Club, businesses and communities came together. And Matt, you and the officers did an excellent job in dealing with the issues like you are now. You mentioned perception, but some of this is reality too. It's not just perception. And you are put in place and you are working constructively hard, and Leanne and others, to deal with this. So again, not from me, this is criticism from the public. So I alluded to a public spaces protection order. I've noticed in the reports and some of the what Eleanor has mentioned about orders, but a public spaces protection order would, in my opinion, deal with these issues. However, I'm not deluded enough to recognise we probably cannot resource it. And that's the key. It's about resourcing things. So what we do, we use the resources we've got to do the best job we can. Now, is that good enough? You mentioned perception. Is it good enough for the businesses and the public? I don't think it is. And it's not a criticism. It's about how we eventually deliver what is expected, not just what we can achieve. And those are the points from me. As I said, I could go on and on and on. I have had hundreds and hundreds. So it's not just perception. There's a lot of reality to what is happening. And I don't want to be part of something that quite seriously happens because of the lack of policing. And that's where I'm coming from. And again, I want to finally reiterate, it's not a criticism. It's about asking you all, You're all in positions of power. Leanne, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Public Protection. You're all in positions to perhaps recognise and put a plan together where we can get the right outcomes, which you are doing, but get this money perhaps, get further resources in different ways. I don't know how. I'm asking you. It's a plea. It's a plea from me as chair, and it's a plea from those of the public that have contacted me, really. So I will finish there. And obviously, there's a few hands up. Ellen, I'll come to you first, and then I'll go to Matt, and then Leanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming to me first. I thought if I come in first before Matt comes in on the sort of police resources kind of side of things, a couple of things you've raised that I think I could probably touch on. First and foremost, just a reminder for everybody when we talk about reporting through to 101 that there are other mechanisms as well, and that's really something that we've got to keep on reminding the public. You know, you can contact through sort of Facebook Messenger, you can contact through online QR codes, etc., etc. And I know people will say, oh, but that's not immediate. But if you're ringing through to 101 as a non-emergency line, it doesn't require an emergency response. Obviously, 999 is there for that. So when we're thinking about non-emergency situations, low-level incidents that don't need reporting or just to be logged, we need to keep reminding the public of the mechanisms that are in place to be able to do that. We know some of our businesses and traders have said, I can't afford to be waiting on the phone for 20 minutes while I try and get through because I'm missing custom, I'm away from the desk, etc., etc. And the police, of course, absolutely recognise that. And whilst, you know, I in my role and the team can't influence that, we can do our bit by sharing what other mechanisms are available for people to be able to report. Secondly, in terms of our subgroup meeting, this may be a silly question, Chair, I'm not sure. By all means, we'd be happy for you to be included within that meeting and for you to attend. But it's always been my understanding that because you're the chair of the Scrutiny Committee, how would you then be able to scrutinise the work that we're doing if you sit on the meetings? That might be a silly question. As an officer, I'm not 100% sure, but perhaps you could give me some clarity around that. But by all means, as I've said, happy for you to attend. I would just worry about this process and the sort of governance then as a result of that. CCTV, Chris Cole, our manager of CCTV, I don't think he's on the call today. You'll be aware there's this huge rollout of new CCTV technology that's underway. I think the tendering process is ongoing as we speak. It will be brand new technology, you know, better contacts with the police, of course, the better technology we've got, better imagery we've got. There's a whole host of positives that can only come out of that work. And I believe there's a press release this week that's gone out about that. It may have already happened. I'm not entirely sure, but just to rest assured that is, you know, something that's going on. The final thing for me then would be in terms of PSPOs, public space protection orders. I know that we've spoken about this previously, Chair, and I've also had individual meetings with Councillor Leanne, the subgroup, when we've been exploring all of the powers that we've got available to us and what options we can take. I've even spoken to our head of legal as well for him to try and give me a bit of a rounded view really on what this option looks like. What I'd like to do, Chair, is to prepare a briefing note for you and the other members on the usage of PSPOs. I think there's a lot of misconception really around their effectiveness. You know, they are a tool in the box, absolutely. But what we're talking about in reality, as you rightly said, about resources, we will ultimately, if we got a PSPO, let's say Windsor Road, for example, there would be signs up then to say that there is a public space protection order in place which prohibits X, Y, and Z. If the police resource or other resources aren't there to police that, it's only as good as people's goodwill to not conduct those behaviours and activities that are prohibited within that zone. And one of the other concerns that we've got is that it does tend to displace the problem. So if people do actually adhere to not behaving in that way within that zone, wherever the boundary of the PSPO stops, there's nothing to say that they can't do that on the edge. And the example I always give, which is not antisocial behaviour related, but just as an example, there's a public space protection order on Aberavon beachfront, which prevents people from taking their dogs onto an area of the sand in certain months of the year. Where that stops, everybody takes their dogs on the sand either side of it. So it solves a problem in one place, but it creates one elsewhere. And we know from other local authorities that PSPOs have had that very problem. The other thing we've got to think about as well is if we're trying to encourage new businesses and traders to come into the town and we're trying to resolve the problems that we've got, if we then put a PSPO, a big red line around the whole of the Neath town centre, it's going to be a huge, huge deterrent for the people looking to come into the town because they think they won't touch it with a barge pole. And the other thing we've got to consider as well is, are we then penalising all of the residents of Neath Talbot when we're actually talking about a very small number of people who are causing these problems? So again, as I've always said, Chair, we are open to suggestions, recommendations, and we will continue to explore every option that we've got, but we've got to take a rounded view and weigh up the pros and cons and what difference or effectiveness these kind of tools will have. So far, the approach we've taken is the more supportive approach, where we're looking at what agencies can rally around us. And when we look at community protection notices, warnings, criminal behaviour orders, that we do that alongside the offers of engagement into support services, appropriate help, whether that's WCADA, housing options, you name it. And they carry quite a bit more weight than probably just giving somebody a fixed penalty notice, which is what would happen with a PSPO. So, you know, there's a few things just to consider, but as I said, if you'd be happy, I could prepare a briefing note with the help of our head of legal. We can weigh up the pros and cons again, and we can have a look at what options we've got. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll come back to you on a few of those points before Bryn Martin or Leanne. Firstly, on the observing of the meeting, I spoke to Craig. I don't think it's an issue as long as I'm not an active member of the meeting.
Yeah.
It's about gathering information so that from that meeting, I assume once a note or briefing note through Leanne and others is done, it becomes whatever becomes public knowledge or whatever's private is dealt with in that way. So again, I will check with Craig, but I think it would be in the best interest if it's achievable. If for the reasons you've given it's not a legal reason for scrutiny, then I'll accept that. Right, on the public space and protection order, I've gone through this prior in your was there before you, sorry, Eleanor, and with Karen in her role at the time. And again, I've taken on board a lot of what you're saying, but those were the same arguments at the time. It was clear that it's resource. I think the part that you mentioned about it being the council can implement the order easily, and then it's the police to actually carry out the order. And if they haven't the resources to do so, then it will fail. And that isn't in the best interest of anybody. So I take on board that, but I still think, given if and when progress and when you bring back to meetings, antisocial behaviour is on the increase, then maybe it's an option. And I would welcome your report as an update on that, as and when, with pros and cons, so that it can be looked at. And I doubt. I'm not sure what else you mentioned, because I did want to answer everything you said. What were the other 2 points you said that I mentioned?
I think there were only comments, Councillor, around the CCTV and the other reporting mechanisms through one.
Excellent. Yeah, well, as you will be aware, I mean, I have been very active on a personal note, not chair, as a councillor. I've been told by Matt and other officers to tell everybody to report by 101. I think Leanne, Dean and others said today that we must get the reporting up. Number 101, I know we've got the QR code that Sean mentioned earlier and other means. Now, maybe we should have a sheet again to share so that all members of the public can see all the avenues they can report on. That'd be great. I'm happy to share that across many platforms, but I will emphasize that I've been told to tell everybody to phone 101, and that's what I've been doing on a regular basis. And the 101, even though it's got more strings to its bow, is still not as good as it possibly could. And I will reiterate, it's resources again, because when I visited the Bridgend office, the officer there in charge told me that a whole desk of officers or citizens who man them were on the afternoon shift. So they didn't have the resources. The dropped calls at that time, before the callback system, was huge. There was 600, 700 going up on the board. So what I'm getting at is that earlier on in the conversation that Dean and others mentioned, are we having a true reflection on reported crimes? So therefore, that would, when you say that the figures are down, that Matt mentioned earlier, are they really down? Or is it the case that there are a lot not getting reported? I would like to know, you know, maybe do a further piece of work with the 101 and the QR codes and other means. So that was just a bit of response to that question. So I hope that clarifies what I was trying to say. Thank you. Inspector Otterson then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just first of all, I'd just like to make the point that by no means am I suggesting that all we're dealing with is a false perception issue. We wouldn't have an operation in place with a lot of dedicated resource and funding if we didn't. So I did pose the question whether we've got an amplified negative perception due to the way certain things have gone online. But at no point am I suggesting that the Neath Town Centre is problem-free. Secondly, in relation to resources, I'd just like to kind of indicate that Neath, as a policing sector, has been granted 5 additional police officers as a result of reviews conducted on supply and demand. They won't arrive overnight, but as you're aware, we're recruiting heavily at this moment in time, and certainly in the near future, hopefully those resources will arrive and bolster the resilience we have locally. In addition to that, you mentioned about the delay in attendance at that specific incident the other day. I'd like to just point out that that's not the norm. We've always worked as an operational division. We share resources and resources move from one area to another to meet demand. There are occasions where there are pinch points, where there is a delay in attendance, but that's not the norm. So I just wanted to make that point. Generally, you will receive a far shorter attendance time and from a local resource.
Thank you, Matt. Is that it, or is there no? Yeah.
Just on top of that as well, in terms of the reporting.
Gareth, is it? Yeah, go on.
Sorry, just in terms of the reporting mechanisms, we've put stuff out on social media this week for the public to encourage the multitude of other ways of reporting. I've also circulated that through to Eleanor to pass on to yourselves to pass on. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Gareth, before I bring you in, just in response, Matt, again, my sort of mannerism may come across as pretty critical. It's asking the questions that the public have asked me and I'm passing them on. Apologies, I can't help my DNA. I am who I am. I may look or sound a bit agitated or whatever, but I don't mean to be. But the point I was making about that, not the norm, that if there had been a fatality where it could have been prevented, that's the point. Where not the norm may occur again is down to resources. It was clearly identified in your own words that the resources were not available for whatever reason, which I accept. And that's why I'm harping on about resources. So apologies if obviously I work closely with you and I support everything you and your colleagues are doing. And I'm only trying to make things better. Gareth, over to you then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on the PSPO, I just wanted to sort of come in and just give an update regarding that, really. I mean, we, as the police, I mean, we wouldn't be the prosecuting agency for the PSPO if that was instigated. That would be the local authority. There are some in place in Swansea, looking to put one in place within the city centre at the moment. And obviously, as Ellen has alluded to, one of the pieces of work that we're doing prior to that is we're looking at the sort of dispersal of offences into different areas of that PSPO area. It's not specifically linked to ASB, it'd be linked to sort of different areas within Swansea, looking at sort of no alcohol, no begging and no public toileting at the moment. Unfortunately, the sort of the Chief Constable's current status is on that, is that we would not be involved as a prosecutor within that. Obviously, we'd be involved in providing evidence to the local authority to prosecute, but we would not be able to sort of issue fixed penalty notices because that would lead to a fundamental change in the way of resourcing for us around PCSOs, etc. So just to clarify that, the prosecuting agency for PSPOs will be the council themselves.
Thank you for that. That's very interesting to know. Again, Eleanor, that probably would be in the piece of work that you do, so that we have a better understanding that we can go back to the public with. That's the debate for council. So, Gareth, what I'm taking from that, but it's nice to see Swansea are taking action, in my opinion. But that would be the Swansea Council then would have to enforce that. Would they be given the powers? Is it a legal duty through the police to work with them, or would they have the prosecution powers to enact that order? Just quickly before I go to Leanne.
Yeah, well, it'll be like a phased process, like the ASB process. A certain amount of warnings will be taking place, and then it'll go through to fixed penalty notices, and then court. And again, it'll be up to the council then to take the court. Obviously, the police will have a part to play that. So, for example, if there's a designated no alcohol zone, and we film people on body-worn video, then that information will be passed to the council with the person's details, and then that will be passed then via warning, then into a prosecution. But yeah, that's the basic sort of trend of it, really. That's how it will progress.
Oh, thank you for that, Gareth. Councillor Leanne Jones, then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, really, I welcome this meeting this morning. I know there's a number around this table who are passionate and committed to the work across the whole county borough. I know we're touching upon Neath Town Centre just today, but you can clearly see the engagement, the communication, the work that's ongoing between partner agencies. You touched upon funding earlier, Councillor Hunt. You're absolutely right. You're spot on. The police need more funding. We need more police on the streets. I mean, us as a local authority, we can only do certain things within our remit, and we do push ourselves. We do get that funding when available and do, provide the assistance where needed. But ultimately, it is more police resourcing, and I know I've spoken to Matt about this previously. Alan Michael was in the town centre, the police crime commissioner, last week, and I literally chewed his ear off, and I told him exactly where we were, what was happening. I had a meeting again this week with him and the ACC, Jenny Gilmore, and again I said, there was more police needed on the streets. So I'm absolutely banging that drum and saying, Neath Talbot, we need more officers. But again, you spoke about 101. I've had the same issues and problems. I know we've spoken, Councillor Hunt, and again, I spoke to Matt this week. But I think, when you put things into perspective, and when we say put things into perspective, I absolutely know we've got issues and problems. This is where we are, and this is why Operation Lilium is ongoing, and we're doing the work. And we don't discredit or discount anything that the public is saying. What we are saying is sometimes social media adds fuel to the fire. But if we can get those reports in and show those statistics, I mean, for example, it just so happens if you need a speed camera in your area, if you haven't got that evidence to back up, you won't get that speed camera 24/7. So going back to 101, I mean, South Wales Police put a message out last night, and I think it was quite hit home, actually. And it said, during June, we received more than 64,500 calls, which on average is another new call every 40 seconds. And that is absolutely incredible. So the calls they're taking, and they also said then they've rolled out the QR, and they've got obviously South Wales Police online Twitter. They've received 16,000 contacts via that. So I think it is opening up all these avenues and making sure that the public are aware that these avenues are available. Now, 101, I've got a call back. I've rung on average 5-6 times. I had one bad experience. I reported that in, and I do understand the people's concerns that they don't want to ring that number then. They don't see the point of it. But again, when I was in the Neath Town Centre last week, Matt and I, we were speaking to businesses. They were complaining about things happening.
We asked, have you reported it? No, I haven't bothered. So this is, again, we need to bring people back in. However little or small you think it is, report it, because it all adds to that bigger picture that we need, that Matt can go back then to higher officers and say, well, actually, you know, this is where Operation Lilium has transpired. So I think, you know, I really, really welcome this meeting today and everybody's involvement. And, you know, moving forward, we are listening. I'm in the town centre more on a regular basis now. I'm there this afternoon, actually, with the police, speaking to businesses again, because we do want to listen, and we are listening, and we are committed to working together. So I just want to thank you all really for the continued partnership and support that you're doing on this very important matter. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Leanne, and I have no doubt with everything that you've just said that we're supportive, we agree with. However, we sometimes miss the point of what the public, whether it's a perception or not. We need to, some of the points you raised there needs to be put out. It needs to, that those stats of answering, that, again, I would have said it 100 times today, is resource driven. We have a duty to try and work with what we've got to the best of our ability, but then chase further resources, which you've mentioned today you've had, which is all welcoming news, and hopefully the general public will see that. But they are not aware sometimes of what we're doing, what you are doing. I think those who have sat here today, and when this video goes out, maybe YouTube, they can share it so they can have a good understanding of an excellent debate today. But please, we need to always get the information, because everybody's working really hard. I have no doubt about that. All our officers, all the police, everybody is frustrated, but it's at a different level where we need to be probably going to resolve a lot of what possible perceptions are. So, but thank you very much for that, Leanne, and I concur with a lot of what you just said in that statement. Gareth, is that a legacy hand, or did you want to come back? Chief Inspector?
Legacy hand, my apologies, Chair, I'll take it down.
That's okay. Right. Anybody else? No? 3 no hands. Okay then. I'll move on. Item 7 is the Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. And this programme is attached for information only and for members to note. Obviously, I have Chloe to present this item, so she can probably bring members up to date on the Forward Work Programme. Over to you, Chloe, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Community Safety Forward Work Programme is on page 34 of the agenda. This was recently populated from the recent Forward Work Programme workshop that we held, where members discussed what they would like to put on the Forward Work Programme. So as you can see, it's been populated a little bit more now. We've still got one item to programme in, which is on the position statement and update on CCTV, which I am liaising with officers currently to try and get a date for that particular item. I noted in the conversation as well, we have got the antisocial behaviour general update on town centres and wider areas on for the 17th of December. I'm aware of the discussions we had, that might be too far away, so I can liaise with officers outside this meeting to see if we can bring it closer. I do I'm cautious of the 1st of October meeting. We have got 2 other items, so I don't know if it would be worth it putting on an additional meeting, but I'll work the logistics out with yourself, Chair, and officers outside the meeting, if that's okay with that. And then just in the discussions as well, I think it was mentioned about adding substance misuse to the Forward Work Programme. I'm not sure if Claire wants to come in to say anything about that, but we can definitely programme it in if members want it.
Before I bring Claire in, if he does want to make any information on that, Sean, I believe you probably want to elaborate on the point that you wanted to bring forward, the antisocial behaviour. So I'll go to you first then, please.
Yeah, thanks. I know only briefly, but I just certainly want to reiterate from my perspective that I've got no issue with an additional meeting sooner to discuss the sort of wider issues, and I'd certainly welcome sort of any steer from other committee members on that. But I wouldn't want an overpopulated agenda, and I've got no problem having an additional meeting if we need it.
Thank you, Sean. Claire, did you want to give further information on what Chloe mentioned?
Yes, Chair. I think it would be useful if we gave an update on some, excuse me, some of the work ongoing with the area planning board, and some of the excellent harm reduction work that's happening locally, and which is pleasing to note that a lot of what we are doing locally is being taken up by Welsh Government as examples of good practice. So that might be useful to bring that back to scrutiny, and also to highlight the services that are available, and any performance issues that may be relevant. I think I'm not sure of the logistics of that, but the Police and Crime Commissioner's office is leading on Project ADA, not the Area Planning Board. So I could perhaps liaise with Chloe to see if perhaps we could give an invitation to our contact there in Harrod Metcalf, who might be prepared to come and give a presentation, or if not, if she would be happy for me to do it on her behalf. Is that acceptable, Chair?
Yeah, I think it is. Chloe, can you liaise with Claire on that? Because I think it would be in the interest of this scrutiny committee to have somebody there to give a presentation, so that we can continue the excellent work we are all doing. Is that all right with you, Chloe?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. I'll work out a date with Claire as well, a suitable date for this item to come to the committee, and then we can look at inviting whoever necessary.
Thank you very much. That'll take me to item 8, urgent items. There are none. I will now declare the meeting closed. However, can I just thank you all before I close? Have a lovely weekend, but thank you all. This has been a very, very good debate. A lot of